Welcome to the Hidden History of the Southwest. This is really episode number 1. Colonization of the Americas begins. In my introductory episode, I talked about how the Spanish managed to bump into what is now the Americas because they were looking for a shortcut to India. Now, in this episode, I want to talk about the timeline of Spanish exploration and colonization of the Americas. Now, while the colonization of the Southwest took decades, it really did start early. But even before I do that, I want to backtrack a bit and make sure y'all even know why we're called the Americas. We're called the Americas because of a guy named Amerigo Vespucci. He was an Italian explorer who most historians agree was one of the first Europeans to suggest that the lands that Columbus encountered were not actually a part of Asia, but instead were a new world. Now, Amerigo Vespucci was a participant in multiple voyages in the New World in the late 1490s and early 1500s, and he wrote letters to various family members and others that described the lands he saw as being very distinct from Asia. Now, then in 1507, a German cartographer, that's a map maker, by the name of Martin Waldesmüller, published a world map and a book that was entitled Cosmographia Introductio, which is Latin for Introduction to Cosmography. Now, in this book, he proposed that the newly discovered continent be named America, after Amerigo Vespucci, using the Latinized version of his name, Americus Vespucius. Now, Waldseemüller wrote, "I do not see what right anyone would have to object to calling this part of the world America after Amerigo, its discoverer." Now, what I find hilarious, because we've shown, and we all widely understand, he wasn't even the first European to set foot on the continent or to map it up. But it stuck at the time. Waldmüller's map was widely circulated and influential, and so that's what happened. Now, history is often replete with stories such as that. Now in the beginning, America did only refer to our South America, but over time it came to refer to both the northern and southern continents, hence the Americas, or the northern and southern hemispheres, hence the Americas. So that's where we got the name. Now, back to the timeline. We know that in the early 16th century, that is between 1519 and 1520, Spanish explorers like Alonso Alvarez de Pineda mapped the Texas coast. Now, I do talk more about that in my Hidden History of Texas podcast and my audiobooks on the subject. So if you want, you can find them on my website, arctx.org. And in the future, I'll deal more with it here. Then between 1528 and 1536, Cabeza de Vaca and his companions, who were all survivors of that failed expedition, traveled through Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Now, actually, we think they were really the first Europeans to explore these areas extensively. At least they're the ones we have records of. Then in 1539, Friar Marcos de Niza explored Arizona, and he wrote about the 7 cities of Cibola. Now, these were believed to be rich, golden cities located somewhere in the New World. The story so captivated Spanish conquistadors that in 1540, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado led a major expedition in an effort to find them. This expedition lasted from 1540 until 1542, and Coronado, he did explore the territories of New Mexico and Arizona and parts of Oklahoma, searching for gold and other riches, which we know he was unable to find because, they never existed. But anyway, in the 16th century, that's 1580s to 1590s, colonization began in earnest as Spanish missionaries and settlers began to establish missions and settlements in New Mexico. This significantly expanded Spanish influence in the region. Now, one of the darkest periods in the history of the Southwest actually began in 1598. That was when Juan de Onate led the first Spanish settlement into New Mexico. He also searched for gold up into Oklahoma. He was not a good person. And in a future episode, I'll discuss him in much more detail because to me, one episode that he was involved in symbolizes much of what was really wrong with colonization and colonizers. Now, moving into the 17th century, from about 1680 until 1690, more Spanish missions were established in eastern Texas. Now, this was due to the fact that the French had begun moving into Texas from Louisiana, and the Spanish wanted to protect what they considered to be their territory. Almost simultaneously, between 1687 and 1691, Father Eusebio Francisco Quino explored and mapped southern Arizona. He also founded missions in Pimeria Alta. Now, the Pimeria Alta, which means Upper Pima land, or land of the Upper Pima, was an area that encompassed parts of what are today southern Arizona in the U.S. and northern Sonora in Mexico. Okay, now I'm going to end the timeline in the 18th century and beyond because I'll go more into that as we move along further in the shows. However, during the 18th century, the 1700s that is, Spanish influence continued in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The Spanish established presidios or forts and expanded their network of missions. Now, I was going to talk about the first peoples that the Spanish met, but I think I'll hold off until the next show because I feel it's important that we focus on those people. We've got to give them the due that they deserve. And if you're wondering why we would care about that, the reason is simple. We have to stop pretending that the U.S. has always been a strictly Anglo land. It hasn't been. The U.S. is actually a mosaic made of multiple nationalities, cultures, and our history is one of diversity, and that is especially true here in the American Southwest. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for joining me. Please subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about it. Tell your enemies about it. Tell people you don't care about it. I'd appreciate it. Thanks. This has been the Hidden History of the Southwest.